my name's Noah Deere, and this video is going over the Now You Try problems for evaluating functions symbolically. And this is not going to be an explanation video. We're just going to jump in and run through the solutions. If you want a full explanation for how this works, please go back and watch the previous video. All right, our first problem, number 1, says let g of x equal negative 2x plus 5, and we're going to evaluate the following: g of negative 5, g of 3/2, and g of negative 2/3. So for the first one, we're going to take the negative 5 and we're going to plug it in for the x into the definition of the function. So that's going to be negative 2 times negative 5 in for where the x is, then plus 5. We'll do negative 2 times negative 5 is 10, plus 5, and so that equals 15. So if we input negative 5 into the function g, we'll get out the number 15. So g of negative 5 is the output, and it equals 15 when negative 5 is the input. All right, g of 3/2 will go negative 2 times 3/2 in for the x, and then add 5. And then here we can cancel the 2's out when we do the multiplication. Negative 2 times 3/2. The negative does stay, so it's a negative 3 plus 5. And then negative 3 plus 5 is 2. All right, one more, part C, g of negative 2/3. We're going to have negative 2 times, plug in the negative 2/3 for the x value. And then we want to add 5. All right, here that 2 is over a 1. I can't reduce anything, so let's multiply across now. The negatives will cancel, and we'll get 4/3 plus 5. Now this 5 is over a 1, and to add these we need a common denominator, so I'm going to multiply top and bottom by 3, so that we get 4/3 plus 15/3 equals 19/3. And we can just leave it as an improper fraction. You can write it as a mixed number as well if you'd like, but you are not required to. I'm going to write it side by side here. 3 goes into 19 6 times with a remainder of 1, so it's 6 1/3, and this is either or. All right, number 2, h of x equals the cube root of x. So if we plug in negative 8, h of negative 8 is going to be the cube root of negative 8. Just so you guys realize, part of this is just practicing some arithmetic once we understand how the function notation works. So the cube root of negative 8 is saying what number multiplied by itself 3 times equals negative 8. So just think of whole numbers, like 1 times 1 times 1 is 1, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8. So 2 to the 3rd is 8. 2 times 2 times 2 equals positive 8, but we want a negative 8. So I have negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2. That equals 3 negatives makes a negative 8. So the cube root of negative 8 is negative 2. So we can take the cube root of a negative number, but even though we can't take the square root of a negative number. And I'm not going to go into that lesson now. That's an aside. All right, h of negative 8 over 27 is kind of stepping up the arithmetic a little bit. So we plug in negative 8 over 27 into the cube root that h is defined as. H is defined to be the cube root of the input. So we input negative 8 over 27, we take its cube root. And for this, with fractions, we can just do the top and the bottom separately. So the negative is going to be there. The cube root of 8 is 2, and the cube root of 27 is 3. 3 times 3 is 9, times 3 is 27. So negative 2/3 is the cube root of negative 8 over 27, and if we checked that, it would be negative 2/3 times negative 2/3 times negative 2/3 equals, the three negatives would, two of them would cancel and we'd have one left, and then 2 times 2 times 2 is 8 on top, 3 times 3 times 3 is 27 on the bottom. So that's just our little check that we've done that cube rooting correctly. All right, h of 16, so we want the cube root of 16. You guys note, I like putting little tails at the end of my roots to really hold the numbers inside the root symbol so that we don't accidentally let things trail out from underneath them. All right, so this one's, you know, there is no whole number cube root of 16, but we can write that this is the cube root of 8 times 2, right? 16 is 8 times 2. So this is the cube root of 8 times the cube root of 2. And the cube root of 8 is 2, so we can write that this equals 2 times the cube root of 2. And that's it. That's as much as we can simplify that. We could get a decimal approximation, but this is not about using a calculator. This is just being able to simplify something as much as we can by hand. All right, number 3. Here, k of t equals negative 3.2. That's saying no matter what the input is, the output's negative 3.2. So if we input 7, we output 3.2. If we input negative 3, we output negative 3.2. If we input 9,927.8, we will still output negative 3.2. So all three of these, k of 7 equals negative 3.2, k of negative 3 equals negative 3.2, and k of 9,927.8 equals negative 3.2. All right, with that, we have finished up all of the Now You Try problems for evaluating a function symbolically. Go ahead and move on to the next video, and we'll see you soon. Thank you so much for watching.